Well, we're just shifting from what we were doing Wednesday nights, which we were in Judges, to just kind of give a perspective of how long, really, Wednesday nights were going without actually having in-person services. We started it in Daniel chapter, it was, I think, what's that?
4 or 5.
It was like a little bit further. It's like 9 or 10, I think. And there's 12 chapters in Daniel. So we did it. I remember there's like just a few more left.
See, I'm going by what was in the announcements, because I always have the announcements where we're going.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I'm getting old.
But we were in the latter part of Daniel, and then we went through James, and then now we're in Judges, just to give a little perspective of how much time has passed since then. But we're in Judges chapter 6. The last judge was Deborah and Barak, and their victory over Canaan. And we'll look at Judges chapter 6, verse 1, and we'll read on through verse 10 today, looking at Midian and their oppression of Israel and the call of Gideon. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian overpowered Israel. And because of Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves the dens that are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. For whenever the Israelites planted crops, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. They would encamp against them and devour the produce of the land as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, and no sheep or ox or donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents. They would come like locusts in number. Both they and their camels could not be counted. So they laid waste the land as they came in. And Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the people of Israel cried out for help to the Lord. When the people of Israel cried out to the Lord on account of the Midianites, the Lord sent a prophet to the people of Israel. And he said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you up from Egypt and brought you into the house of slavery, out of the house of slavery. And I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them all out before you and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, but you have not obeyed my voice." Previously, Israel has been in freedom from Canaan for 40 years. They've gone through, some people have been born and some people have died in that intermediate period of the Canaan into now being in slavery or oppression of the Midianites. But the cycle continues where they've gotten proud throughout their freedom, and a whole other generation has come up, and they've allowed idolatry to infiltrate their nation once again. So they're now worshiping Baal, they're worshiping the idols, and now they come under oppression again from Midian. And they're under that oppression for 7 years at this time, which this account begins. This oppression causes Israel to live pretty much like bats. They're living in caves and dens because Midian reaps all of Israel's harvest. Israel has a good harvest, they do all this work, and they have all this cattle. And Midian comes around and just takes all of it. I kind of thought of the impression of, if you've ever seen the child's movie Bug's Life, it's what it kind of reminded me of, like the bugs do, which I think was like the first animated movie of Pixar, but they do all of this work for this crop and the harvest, and then the grasshoppers, who are sort of these big bullies, they come by and they beat them up and they threaten them, and they get a percentage of their crop until eventually they get more and more of their crop, and then the bugs decide to go ahead and to protest and to fight them against it. But that's kind of what Israel is going through now in a much more drastic situation. Israel has to go through all of the hard work of cropping and building and doing all of this, trying to just live as sustenance of your life, and then Midian comes around and reaps all of your harvest. That'd be very frustrating. They consume everything. The way that the author describes it is they're like locusts that come through and eat everything. They don't just take your produce, but they also take your cattle, oxen, everything. It leaves you with very little left. They consume the entire harvest. And this is good for the Midianites because you don't have to do any of the hard work. I mean, you just come around, like the grasshoppers, they come and just reap the harvest. And you don't have to do any of the hard labor because Israel does it all for you. All you have to worry about is just picking it up and taking it. And this despairing situation causes Israel to cry out to the Lord. And how sad it is in all of these situations that we usually see that Israel sees prayer as something that is a last resort. Prayer is something not to start out with, but it's kind of their end result. It's kind of, well, maybe we'll go ahead and pray and cry out to the Lord and something will happen. It's not their first response. It's actually their last response that they give into. It takes 7 years of this to happen. Some of them it takes longer, 15 to 20 years before they decide to respond to the Lord and cry out. It shows how prideful really the human heart can be. But the Lord hears and he responds. But unlike the other situations where the Lord immediately raises up a deliverer, he decides what he's going to do is he's going to send them a prophet this time. He raises up this unknown prophet in verse 7. And this prophet rebukes them, corrects them, goes through this little history lesson in just a few short verses. He says, the Lord's brought you up out of the land of Egypt. You rebelled there. You rebelled again. Just follow the Lord. Pretty common prophetic stuff. And it's interesting that the Lord decides to do that here because he hasn't sent a prophet up prior to this, other than the last judge, Deborah. She was also a prophet as well, so she had that dual role, that dual responsibility. But the Lord's already raised up 4 judges, and out of their order, Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, and Deborah. And yet, they still continue to go throughout this cycle. But before he calls Gideon, he raises up this prophet to call the people to repentance. His words are, I led you up from Egypt, brought you out of the house of slavery, delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You should not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, but you have not obeyed my voice. He wants them to make sure that before they're about to get themselves in the same situation that they've just been delivered over and over again, he uses this cataclysm of this description of what Egypt was like for them. Egypt was very harsh to them. And whenever they would recite and have their celebrations, they would recite it as they themselves went through that suffering. It's not our forefathers went through this, and the Jews still do this today for Passover. But we went through the suffering. We went through this land, and we went through this slavery. This prophet is not named. We have no other recorded testimony of him. He just appears, and then he disappears just as quickly as he was on the scene. But he reminds the people of their history. And now God decides to call up Gideon. In verse 11, the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. And Gideon said to him, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us to the land of Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. And the Lord turned to him and said, go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Did I not send you? And he said to him, please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. And the Lord said to him, but I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. And he said to him, if now I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. Please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present, set it before you. And he said, I will stay till you return. I'm going to preface with what I'm going to say with, I don't think that we should take away at all from this contrast that's given with Gideon beating out the wheat and the winepress all alone, and the kind of in the hiding and darkness, and the angel tells him, O mighty man of valor. But I think that a lot of times we get too stuck on that. I remember hearing several sermons on it, and that was the entire sermon, and I never heard anything else after that. I didn't even know what else happened after that, because that was this main thing that stuck, and then after that there was nothing else that was told. Because the main thing that's being emphasized is not so much that Gideon is here, because we usually picture him as a mouse of a man. He's deathly afraid of the Midianites, and so he's just hiding in this wine press, and he's doing whatever he can to hide. Because what Gideon is doing is wise. It's smart. I mean, yeah, he is a fearful guy that we see throughout this event, because there's some other things that come up. But this isn't just him being a deathly coward. He's not just being a coward, because this is what they all had to do. They all were beating wheat in wine presses, in dens, and caves. This was not anything unique from the rest of Israel, because they knew that if they did it up there, the Midianites would take it. This is the smartest thing to do, is to do it in hiding. So this isn't Gideon being a mouse of a man. This is him just being wise and doing it. Nevertheless, the angel tells him that he is a man of valor, that he is a brave person, and he should deliver the people from the Midianites with his own might. He says, in your strength, and he wants to know, how am I supposed to do this? And he says, I'll be with you. Our point that we usually get stuck on is the one line, while we ignore the rest. What Gideon was doing was not uncommon. But the real contrast here is not so much the character of Gideon, but it's the situation of Gideon. Because the angel of the Lord tells Gideon, hey, the Lord is with you. And Gideon is here in the winepress having to hide like a mouse, and he's deathly afraid of what's going to happen to him. And so he's like with his fork, threshing out whatever he can. It's better to do up there so that you have the wind to take away from the chaff. But he's like kind of angry because he's like, well, where is he then? Because the angel just said, hey, the Lord is with you and he's with your people. He's like, I'm living in caves. I mean, the people of the Lord are living like bats. We're living like worms. You mean to tell me that God's with me? Well, show me. Where is he? And that's why he actually does a little debate with the angel of the Lord, because the angel of the Lord just told him, God is in the midst with you, and you're a man of valor. Gideon says, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us? So, well, prove it to me. God's with us. Well, then, where is he? He's obviously not with me, because here I am having to hide from the Midianites, and he doesn't even recognize at first this angelic creature, so he thinks that he's just a regular man, probably wanting to know what does he want from him. But Gideon inquires, where is the presence of God? God has, in Gideon's eyes, God's left them. God's not with us. But sometimes God is closest to us when we least feel him. We get so stuck, I think, and we're created to be beings who have feelings and emotions, but sometimes we get so stuck on that where we feel as though God is far away from us and think that he's not here. But it's not contingent on our feelings. It's contingent on his decision to be there or not. It's contingent on him, not on us. And God can touch you in the least way and least expect it. Gideon thinks that the Lord has forsaken them, but in all reality, he's right there with them. He's in there with him in the winepress. At times, God is right there in the heart of suffering, where we may think that he's far away from us. Because the Psalms say that God is near to the brokenhearted. There's several things that, if you want to use this terminology, there's several things that God is attracted to. One of them is humility, and one of them is brokenness. God's not attracted to pride. He's not attracted to us being highly esteemed in our own eyes. God's attracted to us being in a broken situation. I always mention that during funerals, that God is near to the brokenhearted, because that could be at a time where it feels as though God is the furthest away. That he's not close in that time. God is right in the heart of suffering. God is in the hospital room when we find out that we have cancer. He's at funerals. He's at our deathbed. He's in the midst of a lost spouse or child. And the angel of the Lord persuades Gideon that God is actually right here with you, even though you may not feel like it. You feel like you're in danger of the Midianites and you're hiding from them, but God is actually right here in your midst. And he persuades Gideon to finally do this battle. But Gideon wants a little assurance, because before he goes in to gather this army, he wants a little bit of collateral for this. He says, well, before you do this, I want a sign. If you stay here while I leave, and I come back bringing this present, the sign that you're going to be with me is that you're still staying here. We don't know how long from his house from here that he has to walk, so maybe this is being pretty gracious for the angel of the Lord to stay there while he goes. But before he does, he tries to persuade him, kind of like Moses. He says, I'm the weakest of my family. In fact, my clan is the weakest of the tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh's a big tribe, really. It's not known as the least tribe. But he says, we're the half tribe, we're part of the half tribe, and we're the least of that tribe. So he's really trying to tell the angel of the Lord that you've got the wrong guy. Because if you think we're some big clan, that I'm a big warrior, then you've got the wrong person. And he assures them. Now, this may be playing a little bit too much of the imagination, but previously, in the oppression of Canaan, when Deborah calls Barak to assemble the army, and then Sisera is killed by Jael, and Deborah has this prophetic song that's inspired by the Spirit, that she sings a song, and she's the main leader of it in the Hebrew. It says the song of Deborah and Barak, but she's the main leader of the song in the previous chapter. And throughout this song, it tells the story of basically the death of Sisera, the commander of the army. And then it goes throughout this of all the nations that help them. There's two nations that mainly help them whenever they call out to battle against Canaan. And Canaan is a very strong army at that time. That's Naphtali and it's Zebulun. It's those two tribes that mainly help, but also they call the rest of the tribes to help. And there's some tribes that do help them. And throughout this song, Deborah praises those tribes that help them. He says, thank you this tribe, thank you this tribe will be blessed. But then she shames the tribes that don't help them. And she said, you were sitting on your hands, you failed us the time that we really needed you, you didn't help us. One of the one tribe that she shames, or one of them, is the half tribe of Manasseh that doesn't come and help them. And I don't have a way to prove it, but I don't have a way to disprove it. I almost wonder if that's Gideon's tribe. Or, well, it's his tribe, but I almost wonder if that's part of his clan. If he's that half tribe of Manasseh that was shamed in Deborah's song, which they all knew, I'm sure, that didn't come to the army. So for him to say to the angel of the Lord, hey, you got the wrong people. We're shameful people. We're not. And you find out that his people, his family is actually Baal worshipers too. But the angel assures him that he's his man. He's the one that he's chosen. Just like with Jonah, when God picks someone, he picks them. One Gideon tries to persuade him elsewhere. He's not interested in that. And then, so Gideon goes to his house, verse 19, prepares a young goat, unleavened cakes from an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket, the broth he put in a pot, and brought them to him under the terebinth and presented them. So he has almost kind of this stew thing going on that he presents to the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord said to him, take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock and pour the broth over them. He did so. The angel of the Lord reached out to the tip of his staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes. Fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes, and the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. That's a pretty good sign that the guest that he had was no ordinary man. And Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord. Gideon said, alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, peace be to you, do not fear, you shall not die. Then Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it the Lord is peace. To this day it stands at Ophrah, which belongs to the Eberzites, his clan. Gideon thought that for sure, well, I'm going to die, because that's what they all perceived. They perceived that you see God, then you die. Gideon still lived, and he named that place the Lord is peace. Did you have a comment? Or?
No.
Oh, okay.
I love the story of Gideon. It's one of my favorite Bible stories. I just love the story of Gideon.
Gideon's good.
Yeah.
I tried to get all 3 chapters in summary, but we're just only going to get through part of the latter half of chapter 6, just because I wanted to focus on some of the parts that usually, I think, kind of get ignored.
Seriously, probably my favorite Bible story.
That's good, yeah. It is kind of similar to Jonah too, and it kind of just fell into place because Gideon also doesn't want to. At first, he's a little reluctant, and the rest of Gideon's event is he's a little hesitant, because at first he's like, give me a sign, and then later he has that fleece and leaves it out. And he's like, this is going to be the sign. But the angel of the Lord isn't upset with him doing this. He allows it. And in fact, he even has this offering consumed with fire, which is a sign of a pleasing aroma, pleasing offering. So he's not displeased with this, because we see in Scripture sometimes when people question God, God gets upset with them, and I think it's all a disposition of the heart, because you see Zechariah in the New Testament when he's told by the angel that your wife's going to give birth to a child, and he says, how's this going to happen? And the angel says, hey, I stand before in the presence of the Lord. You're going to be mute until this child is named, this child is born. And then Mary does the exact same thing, though, because the angel she asks the angel, well, how's this going to be? Because I've never known a man. And the angel doesn't mute her, though. And she does the exact same thing. But I think there must be a disposition of heart, probably also a different level of accountability. A young woman rather than a priest asking the angel this, so probably a different situation with their hearts as well. So before the Lord wants him to rally up the army, verse 25, that night the Lord said to him, take your father's bull and the second bull, 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah that's beside it. Now this is probably a point where Gideon is really thinking, you really don't have the right man. You want me to do this to this is my father's altar given to Baal, and you want me to take it, it's in the middle of the city, and to take it down and destroy it, and to cut down the Asherah that's right next to it. And then he says to replace it with an altar to the Lord your God on top of the stronghold here with stones laid in due order. Then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah that you shall cut down. So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. Yeah, she liked that part. He was too afraid to do it during the day, which I really like that part. Because Gideon is in the Hall of Faith. He's actually mentioned, he's kind of mentioned as in the miscellaneous list. Several people get some of these verses, and then you get this list, Gideon, Barak, Samson, and you get kind of the miscellaneous part. I call it the drunk, I guess it's kind of a negative terminology, but I call it the drunk door portion of Hebrews 11. It's kind of like everybody else that also lived by faith. And Gideon is thrown in there with the first amongst all the rest. But Gideon was too afraid to take down this altar, and so he did it by night. He took 10 of his men with him, 2 bulls, and he tears down this altar, which shows you how big this altar had to be. I mean, this isn't something little that if you've been to a country that they sacrifice to little idols, they burn a little bit of incense. This is not something that you just pick up and throw off the cliff. This is a huge altar in the middle of the heart of the city, which shows its prominence. And it's his family's. And he has to take 10 people with him. I don't know if the 10 people with him are just as assurance of, hey, if anybody else sees us, maybe I have some backup, some bodyguards or what. But it's 10 of his servants, which also shows that he has some wealth. But he's too afraid to do it during the day. We may think, oh yeah, a big, bold judge like Gideon, well, he's got to go out he does it in the middle of the day. He takes a sledgehammer, he just destroys the altar of Baal. No, he does it in the middle of the night because he's too afraid to do it during the day. But it didn't take away at all from the fact that Gideon is mentioned in Hebrews 11. The author of Hebrews 11 doesn't say, but he was too afraid to do this during the day. He's still mentioned there, and he's still praised for it, which shows to us that it's not so much of us being afraid to do something, to do what's right, but really of us still doing it in the midst of that fear. Yeah. Not necessarily because Gideon wasn't this big, brave guy who went out to go do it, but he still did it even though he was afraid. Did it at night, but still. It's not always about the absence of fear, but doing something in spite of it. So, the people of the town discover what Gideon does. When the men of the town rose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the Asherah beside it was cut down, and the second bull was offered on the altar that had been built. They said to one another, who has done this thing? And after they had searched and inquired, they said, Gideon, the son of Joash, has done this thing. It doesn't say exactly how they knew that. They inquired, they found out whether someone saw them, or they cast lots for it. Then the men of the town said to Joash, bring out your son that he may die. So you see, they're pretty forgiving about it. For he had broken down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah beside it. Joash said to all who stood by him or against him, will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down. Therefore on that day Gideon was called Jerubbaal, that is to say, let Baal contend against him, because he broke down his altar. His father, well, that is his altar. He still says if Baal's a god, which, by the way, is interesting, that the Canaanites, who are the prominent worshippers of Baal is perceived to be as a big bull. So offering a bull on that offering, off of the smoke that's left from the Asherah, is a double hit toward this god. But they want answers, the town wants answers, so they go to and they find out that it's Joash's son, Gideon, and they say, bring him out so that way we can kill him. Joash says, well, if Baal is truly a god, then he can contend for himself. He doesn't need anybody to fight for him. He'll just take care of this. And the people seem satisfied with that up to this point. After this discovery, Gideon is let free, and his name is changed to contending for Baal. But we reflect on two things. I like the name of this altar that Gideon resurrects. The altar is named "The Lord is Peace." Gideon built that at Ophrah, which shows that the heart of God is peace. Out of all places, the heart of his children should also be that of peace. To give a couple references, Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Very simple. If we don't fall into that category of being a peacemaker, we aren't called the children of God. The fruit of the Spirit is peace, that mentioned in Galatians chapter 5. Romans chapter 12, verse 18 says, "If possible, so far as depends on you, live peaceably with all." That's hard to do. That's very hard to do. But it says, if possible, as far as depends on you, because you can't control the other person, but as far as depends on you, live peaceably with all people. Not just those who you like, not just those who like you, but to live peaceably with all. Hebrews 12:14, "Strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord." The last point is idolatry had to be eradicated before this battle could begin. So before Gideon could do this rally of the troops, before he could do this battle, the Lord knew that idolatry had to be eradicated out of the land. Which, we can all hear sermons or things to just go immediately right into the battle, never mind. But to go immediately in the heart of that, without eradicating our idols, we're never going to win. We're always going to still be trapped in some way, some shape, some form, because we haven't learned to get rid of our Asherah, we haven't got rid of our Baals. They're still in our hearts. We cannot fight in the Lord's army while we still have the idols within our hearts. Those have to be eradicated. Those have to be pulled out. The last point is that we have to tear down our idols before we can go to war. Before we can fight in the Lord's army, we have to get rid of the things that can ensnare us. We have to get rid of all of the idols that we can have that snare us and trap us. Timothy Keller makes this distinction between surface idols and deep idols. The surface idols are the easiest things to get rid of. If we have a surface idol of stealing, it can be easy to change that. But there's always things that drive the surface idols. The deep idols always drive it. They're the puppet masters. They're the things that motivate us. They're the things that drive us. Why do we steal? It's one thing to pull out the weed of idolatry, but it's another thing to pull out the root of idolatry. And it's the root that has to be destroyed. Before Gideon could do any battle whatsoever, before he can rally all of these troops and do this great strategy, which the Lord takes down, Gideon has a fairly good army for a while. And then God's like, take it down, take it down, take it down. And then he only has 300 people left. He says, now we're good to go. Now we're good to fight. But I don't know about you, I get encouraged from Gideon. Gideon is not some heroic, big figure. He's just an average guy. But yet the Lord uses him as the judge to deliver their people from the Midianites. These people that run through and take everything from them. Imagine what your life has. I guess we got a little glimpse of it during the pandemic. But think what your life would be like of just having to live in a cave and having to live in hiding. That's your life. That'd be tough. That changes everything. That's holistic. And that was Israel's life for 7 years. But this man Gideon, who the Lord calls, at an unexpected time, he's just getting rid of the chaff or the wheat. And the Lord calls him to deliver their people with 300 people. Thousands of Midianites. So that's all I have tonight.
Good job.
Thank you.
Enjoyed that.
Thank you. Anybody else got any comments or questions or? Interesting one is to think who is the angel of the Lord, because it's shifted back and forth between any time in the Old Testament that the angel of the Lord is used, it goes back and forth between it's the angel of the Lord, it's a messenger, and then it switches to God himself. It happens a lot. And some people believe it's the pre-incarnate Jesus. It's a manifestation, or it's a theophany. It's an appearance of Christ. Some people believe that it just shifts back and forth. But one thing that's interesting is the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, usually always refers to the Lord. Like in this passage, in reading the Greek, it's the Lord, and it's not the angel of the Lord. In the Hebrew, it's the angel of the Lord. But the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and that's the translation that most of the authors of the New Testament use. Most of them, very few of them use the original Hebrew. Most of them use the Septuagint. But because the angel of the Lord even receives worship, it appears at times. So he has to be someone important, I think.
So are the deep idols the same thing as like root spirits, or do they go hand in hand, do you think?
That could be going hand in hand.
So they're different? Or
They might have a certain interplay together, because you see, I think you see new converts go through this really quick. You know, they immediately get rid of the surface idols, and then I think the church rejoices a little too quick and wants to put them up in positions, and especially bad is putting them in positions of leadership really quick. Our last church, we were really bad about, as soon as someone made a profession of faith, we wanted you to do this and this and this. And they were so, we just wanted people to do things. Because we had the terminology was integrate them. And as they're integrated, they're harder to leave the church. It makes the back door narrower while you make the front door wider. And you realize that doesn't keep them. And as integrated as they could be, yeah, you can have people on the worship team, you can have people as integrated as possible, and that won't necessarily keep people. People want to leave, they're going to leave. And once you come to the place where you free yourself of that and do what you can on your part, I don't know how I got to talking about that, but it was because I think new converts do that really quick. Get rid of the surface idols first, but then there's deep motivating things that's underneath that no one's addressed, and they maybe find other ways of those deep idols to find them to manifest, and which they're harder to see anyway. So it's kind of can't blame them.
Could that be why sometimes, whenever somebody gets rid of they're new to Christ and they get rid of the little things, it's like the little things they do that aren't necessarily right, but then they have these underlying issues that they struggle with, and then they think it just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Because they didn't go deep enough.
Yeah. I think one reason why Christianity doesn't work for so many people is it's so isolated for them. That throughout the New Testament letters, we see predominantly Paul refers so much to one another, and the church is the heart of your Christian walk. But we separate and isolate so much, and we think that, I have my private life, and then my church is just kind of the icing on the top. And really, there's so much importance behind us sharpening iron, us being with each other, us encouraging each other, building each other up. And if that's not going on, people become isolated, and people just see themselves as this is my walk and no one else's. Which there's a little truth to that. You can't ride on the coattails of someone else's faith. But I think that's one reason. That's why some people just give it up, because they think that it is just an isolated thing to them, and they don't see the importance of the church. There's so many. Who this originally comes from, but as the saying goes, is he who must have God as father must have the church as mother. As the church should be that important to us, that it's not just a luxury. It's not just an amenity. It's something that's really important to us, and that goes both ways. The body should be there for the one, and weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And I heard it described where someone said the church shouldn't be like a bag of marbles that you shake up and they bounce off of each other. There's no real effect off of each other, but should rather be like grapes that you shake it hard enough and the grapes bump into each other and they bleed and they, bruise each other. And that form of Christianity, that form of church life is messy and hurts and painful. but it's the only kind that we can really live. 'Cause you can live very isolated from the church, and it's easier that way in one sense, but it's just not the way God designed us. He didn't design us to be an island. Yeah. Oh, you don't have to hear me anymore. I'm done.